So I just saw The Odyssey by Sir Christopher Nolan, and it is the reason we have big screens in movie theaters. Great performances, great cinematography, great editing. Ludwig's score is amazing once again. Overall, fantastic film that was ruined for me because of
Alright, my brothers, listen closely.
Epic the Musical. We'll talk about why that is.
Diomedes will lead the charge.
Every frame of this film was shot on IMAX cameras. That is a technical achievement. The sets, the costumes, everything captured was from crew members that are at the top of their game in this industry making films. The performance from the cast is outstanding. Matt Damon gives a great performance. He's obviously a great action hero that we love to watch films of him trying to get home. Anne Hathaway gives a great performance as Penelope, and Tom Holland actually has a lot more weight on his shoulders in this film than I expected. There are great sequences in this film. The Cyclops, all the monsters are really fun to look at and really fun to just know that it was not CGI, that this was a director at the top of his game, forcing perspective, making you really feel like there's giant monsters nearby. The movie being 3 hours long, I do think you kind of feel all 3 hours, but the last act being as good as it was makes it so it all feels worth it in the end. Christopher Nolan is clearly the top director working right now. He's got a $250 million budget, and he's creating a story that everyone was supposed to have read in high school, an ancient Greek poem by Homer. And though, as I said, it is a fantastic movie, my experience and relationship with the film was altered by Epic the Musical. So, you might not be familiar with Epic the Musical, but I'll give you some context. Epic the Musical was written and produced by Jorge Rivera-Herrans. It came out in 2022, and I believe and some came out in 2024 as well. Essentially, it's a concept album. So throughout different acts of the story of the Odyssey, which this musical also tells, he would release the different songs that were recorded. Act 1 being the Troy Saga, 2 the Cyclops Saga, Ocean Saga, and so on all the way to the end of the musical, which was Odysseus returning home as well. How Jorge created this musical, actually, and I remember this back when he started, he held auditions on TikTok for music that he had written and produced. Over months of auditioning, he created a cast and they went and recorded the musical. On YouTube, you can find several dozen videos of people reacting to the album, and Jorge does an incredible job in his interpretation of the Odyssey. Not only is the music fantastic, but all the characters are so well developed that I felt like I knew the Odyssey really well. So cut to me watching the Odyssey in IMAX on Thursday. Right away, the film gives lots of exposition. And I was a little annoyed. In fact, I thought for a moment, this doesn't feel like a strong script until I remembered I'm in a full theater and some people have no idea what the Odyssey is. And this information is really important. The first 10 minutes or so takes place on Ithaca with Odysseus not on screen, where Tom Holland really has to catch the audience up on what is going on. Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, has to explain Odysseus's relationship with Ithaca through conversation with Mentor and
Eumaeus.
He has to explain the relationship between Odysseus and his mother, Penelope, and explain what the suitors are doing in Ithaca. Thematically, he also has to cover the Law of Zeus. The Law of Zeus is discussed, I think, 3 times in that first 10 minutes, and it basically is broken down as the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated. Later in the film, we get to the cave with the Cyclops. Nolan takes a different approach than classically the Cyclops story is told. The Cyclops can speak and even negotiates with Odysseus about them stealing some of his food. Odysseus gives him wine, and there's a fair trade and bartering system, and then the Cyclops breaks the deal and still kills some men, in which Odysseus has to figure out how to deal with the Cyclops outside of just negotiating. Also, this is famously where Odysseus says, "My name is nobody." So when the Cyclops goes outside and talks to his brothers and they ask, "Who hurt you?" the Cyclops says, "Nobody," and Odysseus escapes without having to deal with the other Cyclops on the island. Nolan doesn't go through any of that. This monster Nolan created can speak and does talk about Poseidon, which is the consequence Odysseus has to deal with, which is that this is the son of Poseidon, and so the seas will be against them. But it is just hinted in Christopher Nolan's film that the Cyclops mentions Poseidon's name in his cries. And for me, I was missing out on that negotiation. Odysseus classically is the trickster. He is very wise and witty, as well as a great warrior. This is where we see the Trojan horse scheme, also the scheme with the Cyclops, and throughout the Odyssey of him trying to get out of certain situations. Nolan really takes this as a moment to bond. It's not going to be as easy to get home as we thought. But it is an incredible scene. Character moment for Odysseus. That after they escape the cave, Odysseus shoots the Cyclops out of anger. While in Epic the Musical, which holds closer to the classic telling of the story, Odysseus, out of pride, tells the Cyclops, "My name is actually Odysseus and I'm from Ithaca." And the consequence of him telling the Cyclops this is that Poseidon now knows his name. So now we get into the differences between gods in Epic the Musical and Christopher Nolan's telling. The gods in Epic the Musical are characters. They have their own songs and themes and motivations that are more closer to the motivations of the gods in Greek stories, which is they are flawed gods. They feel they have to hold their power by harsh punishment over men. While in Christopher Nolan's telling, they work more like fates. You have consequence, but you don't ever see motivation from the wind and the waters. You know the crew believes that Poseidon is now against them. And there are storms that come. Now, in Epic the Musical, this does bring some of the best songs and even animations on YouTube that go along with these songs of Poseidon being the enemy against Odysseus and his crew, punishing them for their actions.
So gracious, and yet you hurt the son of mine.
Now I can keep pointing out differences. There's differences everywhere. One's a musical with many different characters and song and dance, while one is a serious film that's grounded in reality where Matt Damon tries to get home. You're not going to be able to tell all the stories in the Odyssey in a 3 hour, even 3 hours that Christopher Nolan has. And he does a great job in capturing the story. But I was projecting emotions, wants, and character moments that I knew from the classic story and from the musical onto Matt Damon. The best example I have of this is the character of Calypso. In Epic the Musical, you get this great song where Calypso is so excited Odysseus has washed up on her shores, and how this is paradise for Odysseus.
Anyways, I've got all you could want here, all you could need here, just you and me, my dear, my love for life. I'm what you want here, I'm what you need here, just you and me, my love in paradise.
The struggle Odysseus has is he wants to go home no matter what. So it is an example of a man so much going home that he is going to push through being in paradise with a goddess that's madly in love with him. Cut to this iteration with Charlize Theron playing Calypso, and is used as a storytelling device where we can kind of do that Christopher Nolan non-linear compressing time by having Matt Damon trying to remember. Now I will say this is the second time I've seen Matt Damon trying to remember his past. So funny, a movie about Matt Damon remembering who he is and trying to get home. But that being said, Calypso mentions she's in love with him, mentions he doesn't really remember, mentions all these things, but they're kind of in a boring place. This isn't paradise. They don't seem to be she doesn't really seem to be in love with him as much as excited to have somebody there. And when she lets him go, I couldn't really figure out why, other than she feels bad for him. While in Epic the Musical, you get the explanation that the reason Calypso is so in love with him and wants him there is she herself is bound to that island, and this is the first person she's been able to interact with however many years. To her, this is destiny that they're going to be together, and it actually takes the other gods to tell her she has to let him go. That aside, the consequence of Odysseus leaving leaves this really great sequence in Epic the Musical where Odysseus essentially thanks her for how he's been treated, but he's got to go home to his wife. So Calypso in this film is more depicted as, I feel, a storytelling device of adding the length of years that Odysseus is away from home. I believe it is 7 years, but even having that number, it could have been 20. It kind of was just a moment of it's been a long time versus the 7 minutes of song that really brings, I feel like, Calypso's character and motivations and the strength of what Odysseus is leaving rather than a sandy beach with a small shelter around him. So leaving the Odyssey, I wanted more exaggeration. I wanted it to be him leaving paradise. I wanted him to be fighting against all the gods that were out to get him in order for him to get home. And when he gets home, killing all the suitors. You want that exaggeration of a man fighting against the odds that you get in Epic the Musical. But after thinking, I'm wrong. They're different stories. And let's tell you, this is why I'm wrong. And now I feel better after thinking about this for a while. Christopher Nolan is teaching a different lesson and a different theme than Epic the Musical or different iterations of the Odyssey. Epic the Musical has a theme, which is, when does a man become a monster? At the beginning, this phrase is described, and it describes a moment where Odysseus has to decide whether to execute a child that would come after him, that the gods say would come after him and destroy Ithaca. And he ends up following through with what the gods have told him because, one, he's followed the gods thus far and their messages of defeating Troy. But he asked the question, when does a man become a monster? And at first, he is not speaking of himself. Right now, he is a hero. But throughout the story of the Odyssey, he becomes a monster to the point that at the end, he kills all the suitors to defend his home. And even prior to that, tortures Poseidon in order to allow Poseidon to let him home. He decides he is now a monster. And if that's what it takes to get home, that's what he'll become. It is a slow breakdown mentally, physically of Odysseus to decide whether he is giving up or if he is becoming a monster in order to get home. There's a beautiful song at the end where he asks basically for forgiveness with Penelope. He tells Penelope he's done so many bad things and he wishes he is not the man that he once was. Now, Christopher Nolan's film. The third act reveals really clearly what the theme is. And it's, we are the monsters. We are the people from the sea that are not honoring Zeus's law. As I mentioned before, Zeus's law is the golden rule, and there is this fear that there is the people from the sea are coming and they are not honoring Zeus's law anymore. But this rumor was started because of the Battle of Troy, and it turns out Odysseus is the people from the sea. The Greeks were those people, and now the Greek Empire themselves are fearing this rumor. This is revealed at the end when Odysseus is talking to Penelope, and he basically mentions how them setting up the Trojan horse was them breaking Zeus's law in trickery that defiled the gods. You get this moment too where he watches Athena's statue get the head cut off while also seeing Zendaya's character get executed. And throughout the film, you have Zendaya, who you think is playing Athena, which I think you could discuss whether it's Athena or just his own thoughts. But this guilt has manifested as this victim he saw. And he finds out through sirens and throughout the story that he really doesn't want to go home because of his guilt of breaking Zeus's law. He is, like this story, the monster. And because he is the monster, he's ashamed to go home, but his crew really wants to go home. So this film is less about the crew getting in Odysseus' way at the end, as much as Odysseus getting in the way of the crew. Obviously, they both make mistakes, but the crew doesn't get to go home because of the consequences of their actions. Christopher Nolan is telling the story that there is consequences to breaking the humanity we have for one another. Civilization has changed because Zeus's law was broken. The golden rule was not honored. Now, the golden rule wasn't just honored in the Trojan War. It's talked about how Agamemnon started the Trojan War. He started the war with the excuse Helen was kidnapped, but really it was over wanting to control trade routes. So again, there is a golden rule broken, where even though you have another theme followed is this excuse of when do you get to bring violence. So Agamemnon has this excuse that Helen was kidnapped, and so we get to bring violence, even though Odysseus states it's really about the trade routes. So it was not a valid reason to invade Troy. More than that, right at the beginning, after Zeus's law is mentioned by Temecula, we see Temeclicus, Tom Holland's character, defend one of the dogs and the slaves in his palace, and the suitor states Telemachus attacked him first, therefore he can now, the Zeus's law is void. Even in the way Odysseus hunts by warning his prey, it is a way of voiding the rules. When I'm warning my prey before I strike, which he honors with the suitors at the end of the film. They tried to kill Odysseus and Telemachus, so that gives kind of the right for them to go home and kill all the suitors who are raging this scheme. But there is justice that Odysseus and Penelope end the film by being exiled because of their actions, though they voluntarily do that, leaving Telemachus to be king of Ithaca, which is really sad ending if you think about it. But this theme of the golden rule and when you defy it, the consequences of your actions are throughout Christopher Nolan's film, which leaves this less exaggerated story and more personal level with today's culture of how do we treat one another? How do we not defy the humanity of others? That is the story of the Odyssey that Christopher Nolan tells. That's a different theme than what was found in Epic the Musical. Epic the Musical has Athena as a magic mentor that trains Odysseus, while in Christopher Nolan's film, Athena represents guilt and shame from one human destroying another. Odysseus then does not ask for forgiveness, but works forward to building a better future for his family and for Ithaca. Now, this is just kind of a rant of thoughts that I had after watching it. Both projects are amazing. The Odyssey is going to grow on me. You should go watch it in theaters. If you haven't, you should listen to Epic the Musical. It is so well done. Jorge is something to be so proud about in that project. But thank you for listening. I have another in-depth review on the Odyssey and how the Odyssey's realism is very reminiscent of Christopher Nolan's work on The Dark Knight and Batman. But if you're seeing this and you're not subscribed, this would be awesome. I'm going to try to make more videos and you're just kind of catching me early. The early wave of YouTube, I guess. Anyways, have a great rest of your day. Take care.